Here. It's really good to be here, by the way. I come to SSP every year, and last year Rubriq was really just a bunch of whiteboards, basically. You know, some ideas that we had kind of listed out. We didn't have a name, but I thought at the time, if I could be presenting in a year from now, I'll be doing something. We'll be on the right track. So it's really great to be here, and it's great to see the interest in the session overall, which is a really interesting session, I think, because I think we all have a different perspective on peer review, and Rubriq is definitely a contrast, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the Q&A afterwards. So I'm here just to talk about what Rubriq is, what we're all about. I have a quick video. This is only 90 seconds. Don't break out the popcorn, but I think it'll give you a sense of kind of why we've created Rubriq and what it's all about, and then I'll go from there. So let me see if this works.
Science is important. It's given us life-saving advances in medicine, helped us create cleaner, safer, better communities, allowed us to explore life's unanswered questions. But the work of discovery is never done, and the one thing we can't afford to lose is time. But that's exactly what the current approach to peer review is costing us. As articles travel from one journal to the next, getting reviewed and re-reviewed and re-re-reviewed, we're all losing precious time doing work that's already been done. And what we may not realize is just how much time it's actually costing us. 15 million hours every year. That's more time than the US invested in the entire Human Genome Project, start to finish. Lost every year. Just imagine what we could do and learn if we could get those hours back into science. Rubriq exists to do just that. We believe that peer review should always be a part of the research process, that every article should be rigorously evaluated by competent and qualified reviewers before it's considered for publication. But we also believe that while every journal is different, there are a few important elements that any journal can use to evaluate research, and discovering those things shouldn't require doing work that's already been done. There is a faster way to publish trusted research, and the sooner we all work together to make it possible, the sooner we'll all have more time to do great science. Sign up and be part of the solution at Rubriq.com.
Okay. I'm sure we could go into Q&A just after the video because it's probably questions and maybe challenging of the numbers. By the way, we posted up on the blog on Rubriq kind of the infographic around that number of 15 million hours, the calculations, and so forth. So if you're interested in learning more about how we came up with it. But it is timely. This is, I just found out yesterday, I was interviewed last week from The Economist. They just published this article. This problem of peer review, this is, I don't even know if this is on the newsstands yet, so I think it'll be today or tomorrow. This is just another validation that there's a lot of room for improvement in how peer review operates. But as you can tell from the video, I'm a traditionalist. Right? I'm very much in the space that pre-publication peer review is needed, rigorous peer review is needed. It's just a matter of let's smarten up the system, if you will, and that's what Rubriq is trying to do. So when we look at the challenges and how do we solve this problem of putting time back into science through improved peer review, I look at it from the standpoint that we have to work within the current system. And the reality is, when I talk to researchers, and I talk to a bunch of them, I work with a bunch of them, they still tell me over and over again that publication in journals is the currency for my career. And that hasn't changed. And so we're trying to be pragmatic about how Rubriq can fit in with that. What we're really trying to do is focus on creating a better match up front. So if we can point authors and papers to the right journals initially, we think we can get a lot of time back into science in that way. But if they are rejected, then there's this opportunity, I think, for portability of reviews and connectivity between systems. So when I talk about Rubriq and the solution, that's kind of how we're approaching the problem in general. So what we've got here, when I've talked in the past about Rubriq, I've really focused on this scorecard approach, this independent review. We have a scorecard we've developed. It's an independent system, and that's one component of what Rubriq is. But I'm also going to talk about the other two pieces that we're building as well, because I think the full solution requires more than just a scorecard. But let's start there. So if you're not familiar with Rubriq, I'll just kind of run through why we developed a scorecard, which is an independent peer review approach, and it feeds into journal recommendations. When I think about journal recommendations, I usually just refer to it as journal loops. You know, people say submit high, they get rejected, they flow through the loops. And by the way, that 15 million hours, that's time that is associated with reviewer time for rejected papers that would move on to the next journal. That's where we're focusing on that metric. I do want to indicate there are tools out there right now that help people find a journal for a paper. EDANS has a tool. There's a tool called Jane out there. You put in your title and your abstract of your paper, you search, and it comes back with matches. But when I think about these tools, and I usually talk about journal loops, I show this picture of a pyramid of journals, and the most prestigious, high impact are at the top, and it just kind of flows down from there. These kinds of tools, they do a good job of doing a subject match, where basically it says, okay, well, this journal published a paper that was very similar in semantic terms, right? But that doesn't really help you solve journal loops. It might tell you that, okay, Nature may have published a paper that had similar words in it, but it doesn't mean that you have a Nature paper. And so in many cases, I think that this exacerbates the problem. It doesn't really help solve it. It might narrow a set of journals by subject, but not really quality. So what we're trying to do with Rubriq is come up with a new way to do an independent review. I'm not going to repeat the video. You guys saw it. But essentially, we created this rubric that basically does a review outside of the lens of one journal. And you do this before you submit to any journal. In fact, you do it before you even decide which journal to submit to. And you can take these reviews and improve the paper, but we can also then go back to the author and say, hey, these are the right matches for this paper, not only in a subject match, but also a novelty and interest match, and what the journal editors are looking for these papers. So we feel like we can narrow it down even more with this kind of independent approach to peer review. There's also benefits to editors, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this system is built, and we've been in beta since January. You can go out, you can create an account, you can log in, you can submit a paper. We've kind of built the thing from the ground up. The scorecard itself is now on, I think, version 7. So it's been a scientific process, if you will. We've done a lot of tests. We've done statistical analysis on the scorecard, and we're feeling really good. It's broken down into the quality of research, the quality of presentation, and the novelty and interest of a paper. And then there are subcategories, and we roll that up to what we call an overall R score for the paper. So after 3 reviewers have looked at the paper, they've scored it, we have a scorecard that looks something like this. This is the summary page. You can see the R score. It's 1 out of 10. You can see the different categories. On the left side, you can actually go into some more details. You can actually see every comment that every reviewer made. If you're a journal and you have an account and you get one of these reports, you can actually see who the reviewers were in their profiles. So it's double-blinded between the author and the reviewers, but we expose the reviewer identities, obviously, to editors because they've told us that's what they need to know, not only how the paper scored, but who did the reviews themselves. Then we generate what we call a journal recommendation report, which is based on the Rubriq score. So it's based on the quality of the paper, but it's also based on the subject of the paper. And we're working on what kind of information authors really need. And I'll talk about journal pages here in a second. But essentially, we can narrow it down in a way that I think works much better in terms of what is the strength of match between the paper and the journal and what the editors are looking for. And we're doing a lot of work now about what information do authors need, what they want, when they're making these decisions. And that goes into another circle I'll talk about in a second. I think a really important point I want to emphasize here is that this is a two-way match in this independent review and recommendations. So journals come in and create accounts as well, and inside Rubriq, they can tell Rubriq what kind of papers they're looking for. So this isn't just a one-way match. Okay, we graded your paper, we scored it, these are the journals that match. We want editors to come in and say, like, I only want papers that, within these fields, maybe within these scores. And I think as people get more familiar with how Rubriq works and the scoring mechanism of Rubriq, we can get very specific about matching the right paper to the right journal. So this is a two-way match. Editors come in and they have a say when their journal should pop up on a recommendation. Okay. So the service is, we're trying to do it fast. I mean, the idea is to shorten the time. And if you do a pre-submission peer review, it can't take months to do. It's not going to solve the problem. It needs to take a week or two. So we're very much focused on tightening this up. I mentioned, we do the report, we do the recommendation, but we also try to do things that will help downstream for any journal this ultimately ends up to. So we want to do the plagiarism checking within Rubriq. We want to get the ORCID ID set up, and we can pass that through to the journals that get the paper ultimately. So the business model for Rubriq. Right now, it's set up to be author as customer, but we've already been approached by other parties that might want to pay for an independent peer review. It's interesting how once you start decoupling the idea of peer review, and we've always said, look, we're not really trying to replace what happens in the journal, but it's interesting, once people see how this Rubriq thing works, they start to see the possibilities. So essentially anyone can come in and pay for a Rubriq report. Right now it's pointed towards authors. We do pay reviewers. We pay reviewers $100. It's not a lot, it's more of an honorarium, but what we're paying them for is to make it a priority in that big stack of papers they have on their desk. And that's how we're trying to speed up the process. And it's free to authors and publishers to come in and create accounts and tell us what you're looking for so we can do the right matching. So what we've done to validate the scorecard, we've been working with publishers. We identified 6 publishers that were really interested and kind of intrigued by what Rubriq was doing. And we set up what we called parallel tests, where we took actual papers that went into the journal, and we said, while you're doing your peer review with your own process that you do today, why don't you send us those same papers, and we'll run them through Rubriq. And then if we could then take our Rubriq report and share them with your editors, at least they can see how their own peer review ran and compared it to how Rubriq scored the papers. And we just wanted feedback. We just wanted to know, was there any value at all in the format of the report that the editors were seeing, in the comments that they got back? So it was a way of us, again, validating the scorecard, but also providing samples of Rubriq to various publishers to get the feedback. And it was, obviously there were some suggestions for improvement. We completely reformatted the Rubriq report for editors based on their feedback. But by and large, the response was really positive. And granted, there was a lot of skepticism up front as well. People thought, I don't know. I will try it, but we'll see. No promises here. But the feedback was really good, not only from editors, but also from reviewers, because reviewers were very much used to doing, you know how these reviewer forms look. They're all basically the same, but it's mostly open fields for comments, and then you make a suggestion on the final decision. We don't ask about decisions, right? This is a review that is done outside the lens of any journal. What we're asking them to do is rate the paper against the rubrics. And so it's a scoring system. Yes, there's areas for comments there, but they really like the structure, and they like the comprehensiveness of what was included in the scorecard itself. So it was very much a comprehensive review, and not only was it a good review, but it actually was done slightly faster than they normally do reviews, which is great. Okay, so that's the independent review piece that we're doing. I want to talk about journal information pages, and how am I doing on time, Jason?
You're good.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Because this is the next phase of Rubriq. And these three areas, between the scorecard, the journal information pages, and the workflow software, they do integrate. So this is kind of an ecosystem we're trying to build in this kind of upfront, upstream place where it's, you're still trying to find out what journal you submit to, you're trying to get your paper scored, you're trying to get into the peer review process. Journal information pages is our next wave of trying to really develop the information needed by authors to make the right choice for their paper, and for them, frankly. So this has been, the timing is interesting. You had the Economist paper. This was something on the Chronicle, I think a week or two ago, a blog that basically said, is it time for journals to be reviewed in a different kind of way? And then there was a Scholarly Kitchen post that Kent did about this. This was good timing because I had just talked about this at a different conference that morning as well. But essentially what we're trying to do, it's not, I wouldn't call it a Better Business Bureau or Consumer Reports. There's different analogies that I think are a little bit closer to what we're trying to do. I think Kelley Blue Book is a good one. What Kelley Blue Book is really all about is everything you need to know to make a smart new car buying decision. This is kind of what these journal pages are going to be. It's a way to standardize the information about journals, bring them together so we can compare, search, and rate. And so it's a combination of really what you see here, and I'm assuming people know what these kind of compare, rate, search systems are. And if it can be done for schools and doctors, it can be done for our industry as well. So the idea here is, and this is another example, the College Board. So when you're searching for universities, what you really want to do is be able to use kind of filters to figure out, okay, here's what I'm looking for, and then have an apples-to-apples comparison across different universities. In this case, the selectivity, which is not that far different from journals, right? You have very highly selective journals and less selective journals. You've got costs down here. So the idea is we believe at Rubriq that the industry is moving towards a service industry, and service industries need these kinds of tools, and so we're gonna develop it. So what we think right now is that this is just way too much to go through on the slide, but these are the kinds of things that authors have told us they would really like to know about journals when they want to do an apples-to-apples comparison. Yeah, there's the general information about the journals that you can find on any journal page, but what about the reputation of a journal? What about the timeliness of journals? I talked about the strength of match to the paper. That's a big deal. Cost, the visibility. So if I get published in this journal, what indexes are covering this journal? What's their copyright policy? And again, what are other authors saying about this journal? And this is a way, in my mind, to bring this together. So it's a bit supplied by you, the publisher. It's a bit supplied by third-party information providers like Thomson Reuters with the impact factor, but it's also provided by the community. And so there is a way, I think there's new metrics that could be developed in here as well. So this is just a mock-up, right? We're getting close to actually launching this publicly, but you can kind of see this is every page every journal will have a page. It'll be off the Rubriq.com website. So when we search, we think we'll see these. We think there's ways to create some visualization around some of these metrics. And I think for me, this isn't much about where you shouldn't publish as where you should, because there's a lot of talk about predatory publishers out there. I think established journals, reputable journals, are wanting a tool like this because it can really show that, hey, we have the reputation, we are solid, the strength of our editorial team, the age of the journal, the affiliation with the society, this is where you want to be. And if you do a great job with timeliness and the quality and your costs are in line, it's going to show. You're going to do great here. So that's the journal information page I'll talk about, which is coming probably mid-late summer, we'll say, is around workflow tools. So I haven't mentioned it, but essentially our business is going to be a freemium business model at this point. These journal information pages are free. Workflow software will be free. And I ran Scholar One for a long time. We have a good idea of how to run workflow tools. So the idea here is that this will be a submit through peer review, through decision system, integrated with Rubriq, integrated in the sense that we have a reviewer database that we've been building with Rubriq. If you use this free workflow tool, you can search our reviewer database. It's part of the deal. There's really no deal. The deal is that reviewers get into a single database, but you have access to the reviewers that are already there. And these are integrated. So on the journal page themselves, you can enable a submit button right here that integrates into our workflow tool. And if you don't want to enable it, that's fine. You can disable it, but there will be a submit button on that page that will either be enabled or disabled. But there are really benefits to this, to tying it all together. So we've got the standardized scorecard. We've got the centralized reviewer database. You can submit from the page on the journal. We've got the concept of publisher pages within this concept as well. So if somebody wants to submit to a publisher, which we haven't heard a lot, we've heard publishers want this, but not a lot of researchers want this. But we're thinking about actually doing this. So if you want to have a system where they can submit to a publisher and then have Rubriq help you cascade it down within your portfolio, that's fine. We can help you with that as well. But this idea of a single reviewer database, I think, is really a strong system. I'm very intrigued by what Jan was talking about with reviewers, and there seems to be a lot of traction around about finding reviewers. This is reviewer fatigue is a real issue right now. But the idea would be reviewers would be able to control who and how they get contacted. The communication system would be like InMail, like if you're on LinkedIn, you don't really know people's email addresses. It's all through the system. Same way with Rubriq here. And finally, I'll talk about Rubriq Journal Club, which is the other thing we're going to launch in the workflow section, which is basically allowing researchers to create journal clubs and have specific functionality for journal clubs, and allow them to take the Rubriq scorecard and apply that to actual published papers in a way, which is really great way to then bring in data into the system and try to figure out how our scores match up to published papers and how we can connect our scores to journals as a new way of reputation ranking. So this will be launched this year as well. Okay, so that's kind of where Rubriq is heading, the three areas that kind of are interconnected. I'll just end up with one little comment here. So, I'm talking to a group of publishers, so my message would be, if you're asking, well, okay, so what? If you want to learn more, obviously come to the website. Accounts are there. In fact, we have 2,000 journals that already have not accounts, but journals in the system that have information. And you can come in, if you are an editor for one of these journals, you can come in and create an account and tell us, oh, that's my journal, and then we can associate your account with a journal so you can make sure the information on that journal is up to date. That's it. Thank you.